How We Won by Charlotte T. Zitlow, Chapter 15, Getting Our Feet Wet and Moving Forward. On January 1st, 1972, Bloomington entered a new era. In place of 8 solid Republican citizens deeply entrenched in the community, in churches, and fraternal organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and United Fund, 8 newer Democratic faces swore to do their best to govern the city of Bloomington on the city council. The new Democratic members were also involved in community activities and had a good, probably a better, understanding of what was going on in the city at the time. We were joined by a ninth member of the council, Jack Morrison, the remaining Republican incumbent. We were intent on enacting the ambitious agenda of systematic change we had actively preached in the campaign, although the larger Bloomington community had an inkling that the shift in the council would be major. Many observers did not perceive that a whole group of activists was behind it. We meant business. We, even more than the mayor, represented the breadth of the impact that Bloomington was about to experience. William Bill Andrews and Grace Johnson were sworn in as well. Bill became city court judge and Grace Johnson clerk of the council and the court. They also brought with them plans to expand their offices and change the way they did business. Andrews, a Republican, vowed to start a small claims court, the first in the state, which the Democrats fully supported. Johnson, a Democrat, promised to produce much more complete minutes of council meetings and to work with Andrews to streamline city court procedures. They had plans. The council chambers in the building intended as police headquarters, but now City Hall, were alive with hope and enthusiasm. Just how revolutionary would these novices be? Would they have any idea how to govern? In 1972, there was plenty of ad hoc training for mayors, and some of that was more formal, but there was none for city councils. Presumably, despite the powers granted them in the Indiana State Code, they would just follow the lead of the administration, saying yes or no, with few exceptions. The council was ready to probe the limits of its power while pledging to work with the mayor as much as seemed right. We were off on a track not tread by many councils, yet full of hope and goodwill. There was much to learn. We had strongly denounced the common practice of patronage. We were committed to completely ignoring it here, and furthermore, to keeping all employees, regardless of party affiliation or loyalty, as long as they were doing a good job. While both ours and some of the old guardees thought that was a serious mistake, we thought it would lead to more efficiency, better morale, and better government. Why lose experience? We were learning fast that a good many of the higher level appointments served at the discretion of the mayor, and this made sense. He should appoint his own assistant and office staff, and for the most part, his department heads. However, we also learned that several of the critical appointments had to be made by the commissions they served, notably planning, redevelopment, and parks and recreation. By statutes, these positions were to be selected by members of their boards, recommending their selection to the mayor. Since many members of the boards were in the middle of terms, this could take a while, and the council had only the power of suggestion. In the first few meetings, we came face to face with the challenges of creating an organization. Our meetings were very long, and I, for one, had not had a lot of experience in moving things along. We were thrilled with the outpouring of exuberant citizen participation, but by 11:30 p.m., and after 4 hours of sitting, folks got tired. One of our surprises was not only the number, but the variety of pent-up demands. More about that later. We had to learn to be both interested and efficient. It took a while, but eventually we mastered that. I devoured a Mason's Rules of Legislative Procedures, and Owl Toll, as parliamentarian, added his meticulously researched advice. One of our initial concerns was building bridges with other governmental entities. City-county cooperation had been a frequently discussed point, and we did not want to do anything that would not facilitate it, so we spent more time on setting time for regular meetings than we might have done otherwise. We did not want to conflict with the meeting times of county commissioners, county council, school board, and various planning commissions. It was mighty complicated, but we made the effort. In working with Grace Johnson, we started getting minutes that were virtually verbatim. They are now probably the best records of community activity in the entire area. The history of Bloomington in real time. and they have been well preserved by the conscientious city clerks ever since. Finances, as we knew but hadn't fully absorbed, were a significant component of our job. We had the responsibility of oversight, had to manage the transfer of funds, appropriations, and approve the budget. At that time, too, the council by law set fire and police salaries, a departure from other salary procedures. Fortunately, the mayor had appointed the experienced and insightful Martha Ellen Sims as city controller. She had not dealt directly with municipal finances up to then, but she knew a lot about property law, taxes, and state and other local government. She was a quick study and got a lot of support from the man she was replacing, one of the two prominent Howard Youngs. She did her best to bring us up to speed. However, when the first transfer of funds was handed to us for approval, we looked at the amount, over $2 million. Although we managed our own personal business and were not foreign to spreadsheets and adding and subtracting, the seven-digit numbers involved in municipal finances gave most of us pause. Ordinary financial understanding would not, however, have prepared us for some of the early revelations about the budget we had inherited. First, we had to find city general funds to pay back the money to utilities that Mayor Hooker had used illegally to buy the property on Kirkwood and Dunn for the aborted downtown high-rise project. Secondly, we were informed by the Indiana State Board of Accounts that the previous administration had used an apparently common practice of not booking a large number of accounts payable in 1971, thus leaving us to find money to pay them in 1972. The practice made the Hooker team seem in better financial shape than they were. We had to fix it. With Miss Sims' guidance, we did. We quickly got fluent with 7, 8, even 9-digit money amounts, but it took some adjustment. Citizen government is great, but there is a learning curve. Perhaps we were also very cautious about approving such large sums lightly without a full explanation. One of our commitments to the campaign was to improve infrastructure and make sure we had excellent and abundant drinking water and environmentally safe wastewater treatment. Maintaining excellent water and sewer facilities, we learned, was an expensive matter, and the federal government, especially under the Great Society initiatives, required more than we were doing. The cost of such ventures were beyond local funding capacity. One of the first signs of our new approach to problem solving was a delegation's foray to our representatives and senators in Congress. The mayor, the president of the city council, a woman, a key member of the redevelopment commission, and several other staffers flew to Washington to ask our delegation to help us identify and get appropriate federal funding for urgent projects in Bloomington. It was a major first, with the results that still reverberate. We also discovered that an engineer from Black & Veatch, a major utilities consulting firm, had a desk in our utilities building. This did not immediately strike us as odd, but it did help us understand the importance of that consultant firm to the operations of the city over time. We began to learn, too, that with a plethora of federal programs generated by the war on poverty that had sprung up, we had entered what was to become one of the dominant features of modern American government that prevails today from small towns to the U.S. Senate. We were unknowingly entering the era of consultants. While there had been consultants before, they were now beginning to be omnipresent, relatively unaccountable, but a godsend to ignorant neophytes such as we. They were well aware of this, and they knew the ins and outs of federal jargon and bureaucracies, or they said they did. They certainly knew more than we did. It was all too easy to ask them for the information and inevitably for their advice. They came with ideas of how they would do things, and they often presented them as if there were no choice but to accept. After all, they were the experts, presenting themselves not only as omnipresent, but omniscient. It took a while longer for some of us than for others to realize that they were a sort of unelected shadow government, in some ways leading us by the nose rather than offering us real choices, making insistent recommendations instead of options based on unbiased and clear information. They effectively ruled by suggestion, nudges, knowing smiles, and thick information-dense reports. It was our job to read through these reports and draw the best information from them. But that took time, which many of us did not have. Such shadow government, even at the local level, is more widespread and even of greater concern than most of us realize. But we did not see that at first. It has led us and subsequent administrations in the city and county governments down the garden path on more than one critical occasion, and has caused damage in some instances and cost money, often a great deal in all. It is difficult to judge whether this was intentional or whether it benefited their firms directly if we followed their every recommendation. But it is an endemic element of local governments, as it is in state and federal, and should be met with questions and healthy skepticism. This, too, we learned to our benefit on the one hand, and as a sad, hard lesson on the other. As presiding officer, I got to choreograph the meetings, a power of sorts. I also learned it had its disadvantages. My tendency to ask questions until I fully understood or believed we had gotten to the heart of the matter had to be stifled. I was made to understand that the presiding officer's major function is to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly, efficiently, stays on point, and maintains a civil tone and moves toward conclusion. This is critical, but the temptation to violate it is always strong. Over time, I got pretty good at it, and in the intervening years, I have increasingly understood the value of one truly significant point. Everyone should get to make their point, and everyone should get to respond, but don't get bogged down.